Of the semantics chapter, and the heading of this section is the nyms. The first section under that is hyponyms, and the definition of a hyponym is that they are more specific words that constitute a subclass of a more general word. An example that the textbook uses is tree. That's the general class, and then the hyponym or subclass of that general group would be an example like maple or birch or pine, which would go under the class of tree. The next highlighted section is synonyms, and a definition of synonym is that they are words that have similar meanings and share the same semantic properties. The textbook talks about paraphrasing, and that usually when paraphrasing you tend to use synonyms because there's a sentence, but when you have to re-describe the sentence you use similar words, though they are not the same. And even though they share the same semantic properties, they may have different connotations and denotations. A connotation is a shade of meaning for a word or morpheme, while a denotation is the referential meaning of a word or morpheme, often the first meaning listed in the dictionary. The best example I can think of this is the difference between child and kid. The denotation is exactly the same. The dictionary definition, both will say a child of some sorts, whereas the connotation will imply that a child is perhaps smaller. It's a more affectionate term for a younger human being. It's gentler in some context, whereas kid is almost harsher. I don't want to say harsher, but you would yell across the room, "Hey, kid." Or it would imply an older child rather than a younger one, which child seems to imply. The next section is homonyms. The definition of homonyms are words that sound the same but have different meanings. An example of this would be to, and to. The first is a preposition. The second is the equivalent of also, and therefore is a bit of a reiteration. And then the third is a numerical value. So even though they all sound the same, they have strikingly different meanings. And out of this comes polysemous words, which are words that have more than one meaning, but are the same word. So an example that the textbook uses of this is school. It's a place where children go to get educated, and at the same time it's a collection of fish, a school of fish. And these are used frequently for jokes or puns or something to that extent. Antonyms is the next section highlighted, and these are words that are opposite in one of their semantic properties. Out of this comes several categories, several types of antonyms, essentially. And the first is complementary pairs, which are antonyms that express a binary relationship, such as the words male, female. Further examples are conscious, unconscious, asleep, awake, animal, plant. Essentially, what a complementary pair implies is that if you are male, you are not female, and that not is what tends to highlight what a complementary pair is. The next section is a gradable pair, which is an antonym such as big or little, which is part of a larger set of related words and express the concept that one of them is more, whereas the other is less. Further examples include high, low, fast, slow, and so on. The essential idea here is just as in the complementary pair, not is the emphasis in what almost can help you tell that it is a complementary pair. For gradable pairs, it is the less. Big and then little is less than big, and that's how you know that is a gradable pair. They come in those collections. The last grouping are relational opposites, which are antonyms that express a symmetrical relationship between two words. Examples of this would include parent, child, student, teacher, giver, receiver. There is some sort of relationship. The parent is the parent to the child, and the child is the child to the parent. There's some give and take between them, and hence there's some relation between them, and this is where the relational opposite comes from. The next major section that the textbook presents is structural semantics, and the definition of structural semantics is the study of how the structure of sentences contributes to meaning. The book gives two examples. The teacher taught the students, and the students taught the teacher. Both sentences are made of the same words, but have two strikingly different meanings. Ambiguity comes out of something like this, especially out of sentence structure. And as I did my term paper on grammatical ambiguity and translation, the three different types of ambiguity are very interesting to me, obviously. The three types are lexical and structural, which is being emphasized here, and part of speech ambiguity. The interesting thing about structural is that it's based on word order, and frequently, especially in poetry, word order is essential and used for puns and jokes, but also used to emphasize other words and make points. And that's also another point that the textbook makes, is that what order the words go in can emphasize certain parts of sentences, shifting the focus of the sentence either into a question or a statement. Out of this comes playing with meaning. And contradictions, which the book introduces at this point, are utterances in which the semantic properties of one word unexpectedly do not match with those of another. An example of this might be saying that my husband is a man and my husband is a child. My husband is a child is a contradiction because in our culture, a child cannot be married, therefore he cannot be a husband, whereas in other cultures this might not be true. A further example that comes out of contradiction is what is called an anomalous utterance, which is a statement in which the semantic properties of the words involved don't match. The second sentence is therefore also an anomalous utterance, because it is displaying how the woman feels about her husband as she is displaying with the meaning. He is not actually a child, but by calling the grown man that is her husband a child, she is implying that he is acting in a childlike manner, and through that, conveying how she is feeling about him at that moment. The next example that the textbook uses is my car is hungry, which is also an anomalous utterance, because a car is an inanimate object, while hunger is a biological process, and therefore they're not the same thing. And out of this comes metaphor, because metaphor is when two dissimilar objects are symbolically considered to be similar. The car and hunger are not the same thing. They come from two different realms and two different categories. However, they are put together and almost juxtaposed in this manner to assume some kind of unity, and out of this comes metaphor. And of course, metaphors are used in many forms of writing, many forms of poetry to enhance descriptions. Oxymorons are phrases that combine contradictory words such as sweet sorrow, thunderous silence, and sedentary activity, taking a positive and a negative, happy and sad emotions and putting them next to each other to create a different meaning, to create a different tone in a set of work is essentially what an oxymoron is. And then idioms. Idioms are utterances in which there is a contradiction between meaning of the parts of the utterance and the entire utterance. For example, sweetheart is an idiom, because sweet is something that's sugary, something dealing with taste, whereas heart is an organ that pumps blood through your body. However, sweetheart, put together, is a beloved person. The essential concept of idiom is that these two words, which should together mean sugary, blood-pumping organ, actually mean beloved person, and therefore the two free morphemes, when put together, do not mean what they should mean together, or they don't imply what they should mean together. They form a completely new word. Another example of this is to kick the bucket. You would have no idea what that would mean unless you were introduced into the culture and introduced into what kick the bucket actually means, and therefore you would have no idea what it means by analyzing the semantic properties, and that's what really makes it an idiom in this case. And this is not the end of the chapter, but it is the end of the semantics section.